You are live.
Welcome to Race Talk, the show in
You are
which
live.
we get to come up with real solutions for real issues with race and ethnicity here in America. I am your co host, Darnell Benson, and we have to my left.
I am Wheeler Castaneda. I am the other co-host, and joined with us is our producer and, moderator, Michael Rainwater. And yeah, like Darnell said, this is Race Talk, and we're going to dive into issues of race, ethnicity, and hopefully come up with some actual solutions and conversations to get started so that we can better understand each other. Darnell, you want to give us the rundown of what's going to go on in the show?
First, we want to apologize for the late start. This is our first episode. There were tweaks to work out, so thank you for your patience. So that you can kind of understand the way the show runs. The show is about giving voice to the victims of systemic racism in an environment that seems safe for them to speak, while others are listening, which is important in order to build these bridges, all in the hopes of gaining understanding and continuing to come up with solutions.
Yes. There are some premises for the show too that we'd like to go over. There will be a Q&A afterwards if you want to stick around and interact. If you have any questions, we'll talk about how to ask your questions and how we'll respond. Darnell, you want to hit us with the kind of the step by step?
Yeah, so I kind of did the step by step already, the first one, so we're on to step number two.
Oh, so that would be me.
Yes.
This show also gives an audience a chance to interact about specific topics of the show by commenting and asking questions in our live feed. Yeah.
There will be a topic of the day and or guests. Um, this could be also a time in which we field questions and comments, in which we'll save for a later period in which we'll about to talk about.
Yeah, like I was mentioning before, there's a Q&A that also takes place after the show. We will be live, but our producer will also join us, and we will try and respond to as many of your questions and comments as possible. If we don't get to your questions or your comments, still drop them in there in that chat because that might be what we discuss in our next show with our next guest.
This show is not about being mean and rude towards our guests or each other, including in the live feed. So please remember that it's not trying to be right with a point. It's instead dealing with true experiences and the effects of systemic racism.
Yeah. So in that same vein, any kind of inflammatory remarks or language will result in the audience member or guest being censored from communicating in the live feed and possibly banned from the show. Like Darnell said, this is a solutions-oriented show, and right now there's a lot of listening that needs to be done before we can come up with any solutions. So first and foremost, we will be listening before we start any solutions.
At Race Talk, we recognize the need to focus on learning about the problems that systemic racism has caused a group or ethnicity. We focus on that particular group whose house is on fire at the time, even though there may be many groups that have dealt with it. So right now, that means the African American community has been the one who's been dealing with this. And so we want to build some bridges to help the African American community. We have to pretend like we're like these doctors who are trying to listen to a patient, to try and hear what's going on so that they can then come up with some solutions and work this thing out. So we ask for your um, undivided attention, your courtesy, and that you use all your listening skills to understand and not listening to respond.
Excellent. Well said. So in that, we'll jump off with our first keynote speaker, who is Darnell Benson himself, the co-host and one of the founders of the show. Like I said, moving forward, we will have other guests coming on, and Darnell and I will be co-hosting together, and same kind of setup, same kind of format. But what I want to talk about today, or what I'd like you actually to talk about today, is a story that you told me not too long ago, and which involved profiling, in which you were in a car with three other white gentlemen, And I'll just go ahead and let you tell the story.
So, would like to first make clear again because it's easy for us to find ways to track and distract from what the real issue is. We're dealing with the racism, the prejudice, the many times ignorance that is here in America. So I want you to listen to me very closely, ladies and gentlemen. I am not against the police. I have never been against the police. As a matter of fact, anytime a police officer has been killed, I always put out my blue light bulb and um, on my porch, and then I make sure that I have postings and do lots of praying and things for them. So don't think that this is at all police bashing. This is not. And I need you to understand one other thing before I tell this story. Police officers were not a race or an ethnicity. They were not born police officers. They had to make up their mind that this was something they wanted to do, and they had to take that oath to serve and to protect the public. As an African American male, I had no choice in being this. This is how I was born. So there are great cops, and there are a lot of great cops. But systemic racism doesn't mean that there aren't going to be good and bad in that particular organization or institution. So, my friends who are cops, you know I love you. You know I respect you and appreciate you. And I thank you for your service. My friends who have children who are now cops, they are awesome. I thank them for their service. All the cops I do not know who are not trying to be a bully, whether by using racism or just using police brutality in other ways, God bless you for serving and doing what you have sworn an oath to do. Now that we got that all the way, so you can't say that I'm a cop basher. The profiling situation that I went through has happened, this particular incident, two different times. And this is not leaving out all the other different times that I've been pulled over. I've only had one ticket my whole life, speeding ticket, back in the 90s. Of course, I was wiped off the record because it was only one. This first incident, I traveled with some friends to Elgin, Illinois. Had never been there before. We're at a stoplight, and it was turn left. And I saw a cop was sitting off in the parking lot off to the side. Our light was red, but my buddy wanted to go ahead and go. And I had told him, hey, don't go. There's a cop over there. He'll pull you over. I wasn't thinking about the profiling thing or anything like that. I was worried about him and him getting a ticket that I knew he wasn't going to have to pay. But he wasn't worried about it. Didn't think the cop was going to do anything. Well, as soon as he turned on that red, the cop came and pulled us over. He told my buddy that he had done wrong, and then that was it. Then he went on and gave his attention to me, sitting in the back seat behind my buddy, and along with two other white gentlemen who in the vehicle too. Accused me of being in the town before, causing problems there, and I had never even been in the state of Illinois until that moment, and took my driver's license. Didn't take the driver's, didn't take anyone else in the vehicles. Took mine, and of course found out I had nothing wrong, hadn't done anything, no apologies, nothing like that. So we went on our way. Not too many years after that, I'm back here in the city, and I'm with two people who were part of my youth group as far as youth leaders, and one of their cousins were with us. It's the same exact scenario, different car, different people. I'm the only black guy or African American there. I'm sitting in the back seat, and my buddy who was driving was speeding. They got pulled over. Cop told him, hey, you're speeding, let him off with a warning, then turns his attention to me. Not to the other two white gentlemen again in the vehicle, to me. And just believed I was up to no good for some reason. I'm silent. I'm sitting back there. I have no record. I I'm not a troublemaker. I'm just wanting to get through the situation. I'm as nervous as I'll get out because I've been through the situation in Illinois, and I have been stopped so many other times by cops when I was driving myself. And so he takes my driver's license, and of course he checks to see if I had any warrants or anything like that, but he doesn't do it to anybody else. And my friends who were in the vehicle, they just could not believe it. And one of them brings it up every once in a while, and just continues to say how much he had never really understood until I was there in the vehicle and that happened, and he realized, wow, he overlooked every single one of us straight for the right to it. That was something that I'll never forget, and it's something that continues to make me very nervous anytime that I'm driving, whether I am here close in the city or whether I'm out and about in other little places here in Indiana.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to our next topic too. Was this an example of white privilege, where they overlooked all the other people in the car and focused on the black person? Was this an example of white privilege?
So that's almost like a cuss word to many of my brothers and sisters of the other persuasion. And I think the reason why is because they think of it as something that they choose. Just like I don't choose my skin color, you don't choose your skin color. However, there are benefits that come with the white skin color. And it's just a courtesy that's given. It's an automatic courtesy that's given. And in both those situations, there were automatic courtesies given to where none of the other guys were questioned because they didn't look like me. And though I was probably the only one in that vehicle who hadn't really had any true run-ins with police officers in the way where I've observed them or tickets or anything like that, I was singled out both times. And so it makes me think of a thing I was reading about earlier. Actually, it wasn't what I was reading. It was a video I watched. And in this video, I don't know what the African American male was being accused of or whatever else may be. All I know is this. The officers seem to be about to get really aggressive with them. So a white lady noticed it. And so she immediately, after what just happened here with George Floyd, she jumped on the man to keep the officers from doing anything. And I thought, wow, that was amazing. But the person who was recording said, look, now they're calm. They're talking to the lady. They're not being aggressive anymore. They weren't going to hit her. And so when my friends say to me things like, oh, I've been brutalized by the police and stuff like that, I understand that a lot of people have. But have you been profiled and brutalized? Have you been picked out for multiple occasions for no reason? Keystone here in Indianapolis. For years, I wouldn't even drive down it anymore. I can't tell you how many times driving down Keystone as an African-American male, I was pulled over. Not speeding. Again, keep in mind, I've only had one speeding ticket ever in my life, and it was white. So I'm really careful with that, especially when I was going down a place like Keystone in which I had been stopped. But every time when I would ride down it, I would get pulled over while going the speed limit and not doing anything wrong. And what kept happening at first was they come to me, they wouldn't even tell me what I did wrong. They would ask me for my license and registration. To take it back to the vehicle, find out I had no warrants or anything like that, then bring it back to me, and then they would just leave. And like I said, it's happened so many times that I can't even tell you how many times it happened. Well, one of the final times before I stopped going down Keystone, it was the same occurrence. And then the cop walked back to his vehicle. He was walking back. And so I stopped him. I was like, excuse me, sir, can you please tell me why you pulled me over? And he stuttered for a minute and was like, because you were swerving. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. And he said, okay, have a nice day. Just created some reason because it didn't have a reason. And just imagine the stress every time you get in your vehicle and drive. Anytime a cop gets behind you, you're wondering, is this one of the good guys? Is this one of the guys that's just going to do his job? Or is this a guy who's profiling me because of my race?
I've actually, from a lot of my other friends who are African American, have heard similar stories where they're just walking and they're like, when they say, I don't walk too close to a white person if I'm coming up from behind them because I don't want to scare them.
Mm-hmm.
They either try and pass quickly or they keep their distance. It's stress that they say that they live with all the time. Stuff that the white community might not realize, that this is not a passive thing. This is an everyday kind of stressor that people like African Americans deal with on a daily basis. I asked a lot of my white friends. I said, well, if you were to be arrested, if you were going to jail, and you had a magic switch, and you could change the color of your skin, would you change it to black? Would you change your color skin to black because do you think if you change it to black, you'd be treated better? And none of them said that they would. And then if that is the case, then why aren't people doing more about it? Obviously, they know that there's an issue, right? That's not it's not some sort of phantom out there. This is an actual real problem that people have been dealing with for hundreds of years. So there's another story too that I thought was very interesting that you talked about, and it was kind of dating in a sense, right?
Yes. Huh. So those of you who are viewing this, again, I hope you are watching with an open mind and open heart and open perspective instead of ready to just pounce and continuing to make my experience and experience of other African Americans illegitimate, because that's why we keep getting to this area. So I'm telling you my true life experiences, and I'm only giving you some of them. And these are things that I suppressed, that I kept quiet, or that if I would bring up, I was kind of shut up with it. So I was suffering in silence, and I just choose to no longer suffer in silence. So if you're feeling attacked, you shouldn't feel attacked, because I'm not attacking white people. I'm telling about my experiences that I have had, pretty much with systemic racism. So this one dealing with dating in high school, I went to 2 different high schools. As a matter of fact, I changed schools every 2 years growing up. And it wasn't because my parents were moving us around all the time or just taking us out of schools here and there. It just so happened that those were the things that kept taking place. So my first high school that I was at and my second high school, there weren't really very many African Americans there. I went to private Christian high schools. And so we're talking about the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And so I'm a teenager. I want to date. And when you have one black girl at your first high school, and I think 2 at the second high school, and people say, oh, you should date your own race. Yeah, I am human race. But so anytime I liked a girl and wanted to date her, I would always find out that they would say things to me like, oh, Darnell, you're so nice. And my parents said they really, really like you. You're a good Christian guy. But I can't date you unless there are no good white guys that are around. Now, imagine how that would make me feel when they were trying to give me a compliment. I'm a good guy, but my skin color makes me invalid. or makes me, I don't know the word I want for that, not good enough.
Yeah.
So when you find out that I have issues, then I'm bringing out now about my experiences, and you feel attacked, why are you feeling attacked? I'm telling you again, my experience and how difficult it was even to date growing up when I was seen as second class. I was a citizen, and they would never say out loud that I was not a first class citizen. But if I'm not good enough to date your daughter, even though you say I'm a really good guy, it's because of my skin color, then I am second class.
Yeah, and that's the kind of racism that I think is really really needs to be addressed, because it can seem, if you're not on the receiving end of it, it can seem subtle, and it can seem, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or I didn't, that's not what I meant. And well, yeah, it is. You said it, and that's what you meant.
Right.
Why did you say it? And this is what we need to do. Again, this is why this show exists, right? It's about learning about these things and looking into yourself, and examining, have I done this? Have I said this? Have I made somebody feel uncomfortable because of this? And really, really doing that hard work. And if you're, and I believe that the majority of people are good people, that you'll work to rectify that, because that's how we get. I don't know want to say get through it, but that's how we start to mend
heal.
Yes, to mend those fences. Exactly. You also did tell me, Donnie, that at one point you were like, you wanted to be white, right? Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. And if there's anything you listen to right now about the pains I've been into, you should listen to this, because it's pretty bad when me as a Christian know that the scripture says I was created in God's image and his likeness. And I'm the type of Christian that isn't Christian by going to church. I'm Christian by the way I live my life every day. So I'm in the word that is transformative. However, when you're fighting so bad to feel accepted in the world that you're living in, then you start doing things like me, where this might be the first time some people hear this, but most of my life, I have not seen myself as a black man. I've seen myself as a white man. Why? Because it was the only way I would even accept me, because of not feeling good enough. It was the only way that I could find confidence to sometimes even leave my house, to go somewhere, to be at an event. I would have to see myself as a white man in order to make that happen. And I'm telling you, this is up until recently that I have been doing that. And I found, even with these last 2 weeks, with how much I've struggled emotionally and mentally, and what's led to physically, lots of times the only way that I could find to calm myself was to, again, from my own view, get rid of what I was seeing on the outside and think it's going to be okay. You're not African American right now. And that's crazy when I hear myself say this out loud. It is crazy, but that was exactly what I did to cope and to get through. And then, of course, when I would then try to date, then I'll be reminded, oh, wait a minute. You sound like us. You're around us. Your neighborhood is like ours, even though some of my high school friends seem to think that it wasn't, because we were African-American family. We were the first African-American family on my street in that area, period. Yet any of my white friends who would come would always be afraid that they're going to get shot or something, because they had never been to a black person's house, and they thought that it must have been the ghetto. So living in the white neighborhood, and I couldn't find a way to really cope.
And so I had to do what I had to do. And then I get my bubble burst and be told again, wait a minute. Hey, we do accept you a whole bunch, except for dating our daughters. And so therefore I would then snap at it again and see myself and like, oh, they're right. I am Black. Now, honestly, even as I'm looking at myself through the session, I love how I was created. But it still is a fallback for me to go back to my white skin whenever I'm feeling afraid, when I'm not confident, and it just shouldn't be that way. And again, for those of you who are looking for ways to say that I'm blaming you, I am telling you, would you listen to that? Please listen to a person who's been telling you what they've been going through so that you can stop attacking me in the culture and coming up with all these other reasons on why you shouldn't stand beside us, and behind us and with us.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that we can't emphasize that enough. I mean, that is one of the reasons, again, that this show exists and hopefully continues to exist is the understanding, right? I mean, we talked about the show being a solutions-oriented show. That, yeah, absolutely. But until we know what the problem is, and we can all identify, and there's several, right? Racism is not just this one thing, and no, there's several components that make up an entire part of this ugly thing. So until we break these things down, identify them, and through listening, by people like you, Darnell, who have the experience, right? I can empathize all I want to, but I will never have to walk a day in your shoes. I will never know what it's like to be a Black person in America or anywhere. I will never experience that firsthand, right? The only way that I can learn about it and really empathize is through listening. So again, yes, like, please don't feel like you're being attacked, because that is not what we're here to do. We're here to listen to the stories, identify problems, and then come up with solutions, or at least understanding, right?
Yes. And it reminds me of something even here recently, and how much fear I actually have. I shouldn't, but I do. I had someone who recently asked me if I would renew the wedding vows with her and her husband. And she's a former student of mine. And so I am more than happy to do that because she was a wonderful person. I've had a chance to meet her husband. He seems like a wonderful person. And so, yeah, I was an immediate yes for them. Absolutely. They're great people. But as soon as they told me where the wedding was going to be, all this fear that came over me, all this anxiety that came because it's going to be in a town in which I was called the N-word, in which the whites who were with me were harassed and called the N-word lovers, in which I remember I've gone to that town many times. I'm not saying their name just so they don't feel attacked, but I remember going to that town a few times, and the people who I were with weren't understanding why I was hiding in the floorboard when we would go to a store when we get there to pick up some food we were supposed to take to a pitch in or something there. And it wasn't until recently that one of those friends said, I totally understand now why you did that. I'm like, yeah, I was afraid for my life, literally. And so as this wedding approaches in the fall, excuse me, I'm feeling that same sort of way. And I've been coming up with how many white friends I need to see are going to this wedding that I just need to ride with so that I can feel more protected.
And per your first story, that doesn't necessarily mean you will be.
And it doesn't mean I will be. It might give me that feeling more of safety. Instead of driving by myself, I feel like if I'm in a car with multiple white people, that I might blend unless, of course, we get pulled over. And so if I blend, then people who are at the stoplights with us won't notice me, or won't notice me as easily. and won't give a second look. And then I won't feel as uncomfortable as I'm going to some of these small towns in which they're beautiful towns. I mean, that town, I love the great things you can do in that town and how beautiful and things that it is. But there are still some people there who are bold about their racism, and it's frightening.
Yeah, and that's I mean, obviously I can't imagine how painful that must feel to have to worry about that. Bringing us again, speaking of all these white friends that you do have, I know you've been a great advocate for bringing understanding to the white community, especially since in the wake of all this recently. If you could speak to that a little bit, I think our audience would be really interested to hear.
Yeah, I mean, with this difficult as it's been to really step out and be bold and to use my voice, sorry. In the same token, it's been awesome because of the different people who have been telling me that I'm making a difference and that they have started listening now. They haven't started listening to respond, but they started listening to understand. As a matter of fact, when I first decided to speak out, I had recommended a couple of books. One being this one here, To Make Our World Anew, Volume 1, A History of African Americans to 1880. And so I recommended that and its follow-up book because in school, we don't get even half of what African American history is in America from the get-go until now. And so I took a couple of classes in college on that because I myself, as African American, didn't know everything either. Those classes were wonderful, and these books right here were wonderful. And there are so many things that I learned that made total sense, and I was able to understand how racism was so embedded here in America compared to some of the other countries. And so I had a couple people who did tell me they did buy these books and they were anxiously waiting for them to come. And they told me that their neighbors got them too and how excited they were. That just blessed my soul. And then some of the ones that I've had these one-on-one sessions with, whether by video, telephone, in person, or text message, I haven't had any bad sessions in which someone walked out and hadn't learned something and hadn't gained empathy and didn't start making a change where I could actually see it on their social media with the speaking out and things like that. So this platform that we're doing now with Race Talk, I'm really thankful for it because you know me, Willer. I'm the type of person that I want to save the whole world. And I've been told by people, including one of my pastors from another church who said to me one day, you can't save the whole world. He says, you need to just help who you can help and make sure that you are still balancing out your life and living. And so he is so right. I've heard it from you.
Advice you never take. Because you are such a great guy.
I appreciate that.
Never turning anybody away, regardless of anything. So
it's really hard for me to do that. I mean, I love people, and so for anyone to be offended that I've been telling my story, it's been heartbreaking. I'm like, I'm not saying anything bad about you. I'm telling you my experiences. I thought you would want to know all of me. This is a part that I suppressed, and that you would want to stand beside me, knowing that I've been hurting like this, and that you want to change things instead of blame things. And so this platform, I appreciate it because I think it's going to save my life. I literally, Willer, felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown a few days ago because I was so stressed out. I was so physically worn out, mentally worn out. I don't think people even understood how much my phone was ringing, beeping for text messages, Messenger from Facebook messages, Snapchats, Instagram stuff, video chats. And that's all good because that means that, hey, at least now there's some dialogue going. But I can't save the whole world. So I'm glad we can have a show that has this platform in which, hey, if you want to learn, come here. Willer's a teacher. I'm a teacher. Our producer, Michael Rainwater, he was a teacher. But once you're a teacher for life. And so we do our research. And we have our experience, because there is nothing better than hearing about someone's experience and not some statistics that might validate your right or wrong point.
Absolutely. And to your point, Darnell, there are so many great books out there to read. Another one I want to throw out there is White Fragility, which is another great book. I just did, well, this is more towards teaching, but I just gave a, what's it called? A speech or whatever on for white folks who teach in the hood and the rest of y'all too. There's just, that's more geared if you're a teacher. But it does talk about issues of race and the inequality in the education system. Obviously, like Darnell said, we're all teachers, so that's kind of where all my research has gone to and has been focused on. But yeah, I mean, get the books, pick them up. There's resources out there. Google,
right.
You know, I mean, there are. I'm not saying not to use people as a resource, but there's also things that you can do on your own, and I guarantee you that if you have African American friends that you want to help, if you take the first steps on your own, that's, you know, that shows a lot of initiative.
Yes,
you know,
speaks volumes.
There you go. Darnell, I know you wanted to talk. We want to wrap this up because we want to get to the Q&A, but I know there's an article that you posted on Facebook that was really, I really found it very interesting. I was wanting to know if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I would recommend all our viewers to read this. I posted again on my Facebook. You can get the article right there. It's called George Floyd and Me. And I want to say this because some of these disturbing posts that I've seen talking about George Floyd, I need you to understand this is about way more than George Floyd. Way more than George Floyd. He was more of the straw that broke this camel's back, and just where I just couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't stay silent anymore. And I had to really speak about, as an African American, how we feel and how we also need to have the same type of justice that anyone else who's my white brother and sister will have, to where you're innocent until proven guilty. And now guess what? George Floyd is dead. He doesn't get a trial. So if he was guilty of that counterfeit, we can't say that. You can have all kinds of people who say he was and say he wasn't. He was not given his due process, all because of the color of his skin. But the story George Floyd and Me doesn't focus on George Floyd. It focuses on a man who is a Christian hip hop artist, and he was asked how he was doing. He was asked how he was doing by one of his white Christian sisters. And he went on and told her. Now, when I read this, it just like tore my heart, because it was almost as if I was being interviewed. And many of the things he said here, I was like, wow, did they find a way to get into my brain? Did they find a way to tap into my feelings and to say how I feel when all this happens? And so I just want to hit a couple of little things on here, but you need to read the article. If you want to get to know that suppressed part of me, read the article. But you know, he started off here saying there's a part of me that's saying, spare yourself the pain. It's not worth it. Almost every single day I wake up to that. Almost every single day I wake up to saying to myself, spare yourself the pain. It's not worth it. You know, you have people who say they love you, who are putting up competing statuses without putting your name in it. I mean, I know what they're saying. I'm Black. So if you're saying it about Black people, you're saying it about me. And so it makes it hard to do that because you think, well, I love them. If telling my story is going to hurt them, I should just be quiet. Well, how selfish is that of them? And so I feel like this guy's shy. I'm choosing instead to listen to that part of me that's telling me to speak. Because, as he says in the article, if I don't speak, then I am robbing you people here in this world, whether white, black, Latino, Asian, whatever the case may be, from a chance to stand with me, to stand behind me, and to be there for me. And I don't want to rob you of that. And another thing that I want to hit real quick in is, Willa kind of hit this a little bit earlier, but Shai talks about how walking down the street as a young man, he would begin to notice white people, white women in particular, seem very nervous. And, I've seen them clutch their purses tighter. And that feeling. So I try to avoid that. So if I am walking somewhere, like when I like going to the downtown canal, which for many years has been my happy place, I'll do my best to get over as far as possible if I see a white lady by herself. So I don't want her to feel threatened, which I've seen that so many times. These are things that go through our heads. It doesn't go through our head, man, look at her by herself, I want to mug her. No, there's bad in every ethnicity, or even this one. This one's a big one. Gosh, well, I can't even tell you how big this one is and how many times I've avoided doing this when someone had something for me. You had Shai who talked about how he had a white friend who was going to let him borrow that baby swing, and they were going to leave it out on the porch. And how he was having these heart palpitations as he approached her home, debating whether or not to even get the swing because he didn't want someone to think that he was stealing something, to call the cops. I cannot tell you how many times I have felt that right there, where someone said, hey, you know what? We got this for you. We put it in our mailbox. Or, hey, I got this thing for you. Or even if they brought something for me, maybe a cake plate or something, and say, hey, wasn't able to drop it at your house, I have it sitting on my front porch and go get it. Even when one of my buddies a couple of years ago, him and his family had went out of town, and they had asked me to feed their dogs for them, which I was very happy to do that. Their dogs were nice to me. I love their dogs, and these people are really close to me. Well, I was super, super, super nervous to even go to their house and do that. He had taught me how to go in the gate. When I had gotten there, I could not get that gate open, and I had tried for a couple minutes, and then one of his neighbors came outside, and I can't tell you, it felt like my heart was about to come out of my chest. And so I immediately told them, it's like, hey, I don't know if you've seen me here before, but I'm such and such good friend. I'm here all the time. I'm like family to them. I'm supposed to be feeding their dogs. I'm not totally sure how to get back here. If you can help me, then that's fine. If not, I'll just have to let them know. And it's like, oh, they knew how to because they shared the same gate. That to both of their different backyards, but they said they didn't know how to, and it was because they were suspicious of me. And I'm not blaming them for being suspicious of me, but I was already thinking that might be the case, and I said, okay, I'll just let them know that I couldn't get in, and I did, and they had to have instead another family member go and take care of that. But I mean, there's so many things in this article. I mean, I was highlighting and circling them and things like that because each time I'm like, wow, that's me, that's me, that's me. But that's what I go through in my head. And I think that's why I'm so anxious so many times, even though most people don't know it, because of my delightful smile.
It is delightful, Darnell. Yeah, when you were telling that story, and then we can wrap it up here. I can honestly say I've never experienced anything like that. It's kind of the opposite. If I go to a friend's house to pick up something and somebody looks at me like I'm suspicious, I get really upset and angry. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you looking at me like that? Yeah. I'm not nervous that the cops are going to get called on me or like I'm going to go to jail.
Yeah.
So that's thank you for that, because that made me think of that. and I hadn't thought about that before. So appreciate.
Yes,
that.
please, my wonderful white friends. If you have something you want me to pick up, please save me the anxiety and don't leave it out for me to pick up. Please be home and then hand it to me. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else you want to add before we wrap it up here?
I'm just hoping again that the viewers, whether I know you or not, that again, there is no reason for you to be offended by anything I said. Because if you are, then you're saying that I shouldn't be able to talk about my experiences, which means I'm going to still be in bondage to those experiences. And then you're saying it's a lot like, I mean, I haven't been sexually assaulted, but the Me Too movement, so many of the women who have been assaulted with that, and men, talked about their frustrations of people seeming not to believe them or discredit them or not see their stories as valid or find a way to minimize it. That's what it's feeling like now for the African American culture when we try and just tell our stories, hoping that you would find empathy for us, have some empathy and compassion. And we're not asking you to be our target. We don't want that. You're not our target. Our target is racism. We're saying you guys can truly help us with that if you would just decide to stand beside us and stand behind us and help us fight this thing again. Just like in the past, anything we ever got changed in the United States, from slavery to being able to sit at the Woolworths counter in Alabama to other different things in the civil rights movement, it's because finally having our white brothers and sisters who used their voice, who protected us, who stood with us and helped us to get things done. We're asking for that again, please, ma'ams and sirs.
Well said, and that is one thing I can say that I'm happy about is that I see a lot of people wanting to be allies.
Amen.
And that you're right. We are stronger together. We
Yes.
always will be.
Yes.
For whatever cause, for whatever thing that we want to get changed. Any injustices, when we do it together, we do it better.
Yes.
And again, it comes from understanding, comes from listening, and comes from that's that foundation.
Right.
We are going to take a little quick break here, and then we'll be back for a Q&A session. So drop your questions in the chat if you have any questions that you want to ask or just anything that you're curious about. Go ahead and drop in the chat, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you, Don.
1. You are on.
So we are back. I wanted to thank my co-host Darnell Benson and our producer and moderator Michael Rainwater. We did have one comment about how this was very eye-opening, which we do appreciate, and we must have done a good job, Darnell, because we don't have any questions right now. So.
I thank you. I know it's Pastor David who also was on here. I see Cassie was on here and did a comment. Others who were on here, I'm sorry, I don't know who you would be because there wasn't a comment, but we thank you for those who were able to get here. We apologize again for the technical glitch at the beginning, which made us have to kind of switch things over. First episode live, so we'll be back next week, and we'll be working more on those glitches. But we want to thank you for watching this, because if you watch this, we're already believing that you're someone who wants to make a difference. You want to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem, and that comes with listening. So since we have no questions, we want to thank you once more for being here on Race Talk, show in which we do come up with solutions after listening.